Where did they go? Well, a lot of the time people say to me, oh, well, didn't they just go back to Britain? To which my answer is, well, first of all, fewer than 15% of them actually went to Britain. And second of all, it wasn't back for most of them. Most of these people were as American as any of us. Most of them had been born in the colonies and had never been to Britain, and Britain was as much of a foreign country to them as it would be for most of us today. Same language, of course, all kinds of cultural things in common, but it's still a foreign country. You know, they have a crummy climate, and the Loyalists sure complained about that. I mean, if you're coming from, from Virginia and you find yourself in rainy London, and, same then as it is now, London is really expensive, and if you're coming and showing up there and you have to deal with the bad food and the bad weather and the expensive accommodation, they complained about all of these things. And so many Loyalists who went to Britain found it quite difficult, and those who tended to succeed there were the ones who were most affluent and best connected. Figures like, in fact, Thomas Hutchinson, the governor of Massachusetts, who went over in the 1770s. So they didn't, by and large, go to Britain, and it certainly wasn't back to Britain. Where did they go? Well, more than 50% of them, more than half of them, went to Canada. Out of those who went to Canada, they largely were going to Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, a small number going into Ontario. Another 10,000 or so went to the south. These were people largely from Charleston and Savannah, or who had gone there during the war, and they largely go to the places whose climate and conditions will be most congenial for people who have come from the plantation cultures of the South. That means they go primarily to the plantation cultures of the British Caribbean. They go to Jamaica, which at the time was the richest colony in the British Empire. They go to the Bahamas, which the British give land grants to Loyalists in, and it's to these places that they bring these 15,000 slaves. But there's also Loyalist traces that go everywhere else in the British Empire. For example, a few years after the loss of America, Britain tries to compensate by striking out somewhere else. They strike out by starting a colony in Australia. And on the first fleet to Australia, there were a handful of former American Loyalists. In the provinces of India, which are becoming one of the most critical central places to British imperial power, you will find various Loyalists. Benedict Arnold, for example, notorious traitor in our books, ends up getting commissions for two of his sons in the East India Company Army. And the sons of Benedict Arnold go settle in India and marry Indian women and settle there for the rest of their lives.